Hello, 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 and welcome everyone to another thrilling edition of Eye on Privacy, brought to you by TRU Staffing Partners. My name is Jared Coseglia. I am the CEO and founder of TRU Staffing Partners, and we specialize in data privacy and protection, AI governance, e-discovery and cybersecurity staffing and career consultation. And we are very dedicated to bringing this community every month real-time metrics on trends happening in the data privacy job market. And today we're going to touch upon its intersection with the AI governance job market, which is still burgeoning and emerging, but beginning to codify to the point where we can draw some analysis from it. As you may know, if you've joined us before, if you're new to us, welcome. If you've been with us before, welcome back. Every month we have a guest host. And this month, I am really pleased to be joined by Lorenzo Robleto, who is the Associate General Counsel and Head of Privacy. For all intents and purposes, he's the Chief Privacy Officer of DoorDash. Lorenzo, welcome. Thank you for being here with us. I'm excited to hear all of your take on a lot of the data we have. And please say hello to all of our constituents.
Hey everyone, very excited to be here. I always find these TRU Staffing presentations very enlightening and helpful to understand kind of what's happening in the market and things around hiring trends. So really excited to be here, Jared. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Let's jump right in and unpack some of the things that we are seeing happen right now in the market. For those of you who are new, this is a snapshot of some of the trends that we're tracking. We're definitely going to cover speed of hire today. We're going to cover motivations today. We're going to cover point of hire compensation metrics today, because a lot of those things have changed in the last 30 to 90 days. So let's get into the first major trend that we're seeing. It's October 2024. And if we all remember what happened 2 years ago to the day, it was the big tech layoffs. Zuckerberg lays off 10,000 people at Meta, and we sort of watched the entire world follow suit, thinking we're going to go into a recession in early 2023. We all know now that we're 2 years ahead of that. That didn't quite happen. At the same time, Lorenzo, we were in the middle of the beginning of the AI revolution and the beginning of adoption for AI and its change on all of us. I wanted to kind of kick off today with what you see happening now that we're 2 years out, in terms of, as someone that comes from big tech, what's happening in big tech today with as it relates to privacy hiring? How has AI impacted some of this? And where do you see us headed in big tech and beyond now that we're 2 years out of what we thought was going to be a recession?
That's a great question. And I feel like if you're looking at the privacy space and kind of keeping a pulse on what's happening here in the US and internationally, we see a very much evolving privacy space. You know, with the EU, there's 5 data laws coming into effect, and the privacy teams are being forced to stretch and kind of lean into new areas. So I feel like it's kind of a very interesting time in the privacy space with a lot of change, and privacy teams just kind of leaning into that and, chartering new waters and whatnot when it comes to the space.
And it also kind of strikes me that we're at this point now where we've sort of experimented with some AI technology, maybe on the engineering side, and we're probably at the precipice of moving from experimentation into some real integration and real change management. Would you say that's accurate? And would you say that you're looking for people, as you consider your hiring roadmap for 25 and 26, that have experience with new and different kinds of adoption of technology?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think folks are really kind of looking, maybe not so much for who has experience in the space, but who's kind of naturally curious, who's willing to lean into the space, who has tangible kind of skill sets that can be applied to the space. So maybe folks aren't necessarily looking for someone who has had in-depth AI governance experience, but what are kind of the adjacent fields or skill sets that you would want from someone that they can apply to the space? For example, are folks in GRC space? Have they had, security engineering background? Are they, privacy engineers who could utilize their skill sets to kind of address the evolving landscape when it comes to AI?
Love it. MT, this next trend, I think, is a really important one for everybody. We pretty rigorously track just postings we see on LinkedIn. or on websites of customers that we're tracking, which is essentially the Fortune 1000 and beyond, we saw a big uptick in the amount of posted jobs for privacy pros, a 15% increase from where we were in August to where we were in October. Part of this, I think, is summer lull, but part of it is also the market is heating up again. We'll talk a little bit about how burnout has impacted the market, but people are definitely hitting the point where they need resources in order to be retained. And we're starting to see the jobs go to market. It'll be interesting to see how quickly they get filled. But we'll talk about that a little bit more today too. Are you seeing the same kind of uptick, Lorenzo, in just volume of activity out online?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going to punt the question back at you. Like, what do you think this uptick is attributed to? Is this because of the evolving landscape of privacy, or is this just kind of the job market getting a little bit more hot in general, or kind of a combination of both?
It is a combination of both, but more the latter than the former. And
Mm,
what I mean by that is we're starting to see bifurcation of AI governance and privacy jobs, but I wouldn't necessarily say that those jobs are getting filled or that they're in volume. And even when they go to market, they don't get filled quickly. That last point is really why I think we've seen so many things open now that we're in October. People think it's going to take them 90 to 180 days to fill jobs because without the help of an agency, that's, a conservative amount of time of how long it might take them. Some jobs we're tracking are past 365 days that they've been open and still haven't been filled. They want to start advertising now because they know that they may not fill the job until January, February, or March. Now, that's not all of it, but that's a big part of it. And I also think people want to make publicly known that there are resources coming as a retention strategy for their existing employees, right? When a job gets posted, it becomes real. It's not just talk anymore. And people can see that there's help on the way when they've expressed, extreme burnout, which is the number one thing motivating people who are coming to us looking for jobs.
interesting.
85% of US jobs posted as fully remote still have state specific requirements. So this is the problem with a lot of job portals. And Lorenzo, I'm curious where DoorDash is on this because I know you hire a lot of remote employees. But what we're seeing on the corporate side is, yeah, we'll say remote, but this corporation may only be registered in California and New York. And so they can be remote, but they got to be in the state of New York or California because we have tax implications and we're only registered in those states. What are you seeing out there, Lorenzo? Does the same hold true for DoorDash? And how are you seeing remote policies kind of impact the ability to acquire talent?
That's interesting. And I think it depends on company and probably within companies, team by team. But, I would imagine that some of these state specific requirements are probably where companies may have, a location or an office where they'd like people to kind of attend, although being still remote friendly, they'd like people to attend and work with one another. So that's probably what I would be attributing the state specific requirements to. But at the end of the day, I think it just depends on the company. And again, probably within those companies, the teams and kind of how they work together that kind of depend on whether folks are going to be fully remote, hybrid, or in the office.
100%. And I think it's difficult for them to make this easily searchable for job seekers, right? You got to actually read all the job descriptions and kind of read the fine print to understand that, fully remote may mean fully remote in New York only. Burnout. We talked about this a little bit. Number one motivator for 13 months in a row. We talked to, hundreds of job seekers each month. And this remains the number one reason why they're looking. There's simply too much work for everybody to handle. As we've sort of discussed, and we'll unpack it more, AI governance has now been, I don't want to use the word dumped, but it's the first verb that came to mind, thrust upon. I'll be, more 12th night Shakespearean about it. It has been thrust upon us, the greatness of AI governance to privacy professionals. And so it's a lot. It's a lot. Speed of hire was notably longer in the summer, and we are seeing things start to accelerate. So speed of hire, for those of you that are new to us, and for Lorenzo, is how long from the time a resume is sent to the time a verbal offer is extended that we're tracking. And in the summer, it dragged out. I mean, it was well past 90 days for a lot of mid-market and well past 120 for executive. We're seeing things pick up. People are making decisions faster. which also means there will be more job opportunities coming to market as musical chairs happens and one person leaves and that job becomes available. I also think, Lorenzo, we've sort of hit the end of the point where, hey, if someone in my privacy program leaves, maybe we'll just try to get by without replacing them. I don't know too many programs that are able to make that choice at this point. I think most people are running so lean that if someone departs, they have to be immediately replaced. But I'm curious.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And especially if you're saying, burnout is the number one motivator to change, to switch jobs, I assume that probably, getting a backfill or kind of hiring is going to be very, very important to companies.
And it's unusual because in our cybersecurity business, burnout is rarely what motivates them. It's usually money or vertical mobility,
Mm.
but it's rarely burnout. And when we work in verticals, and I was mentioning this to you in our prep, our e-discovery business, most of the jobs in that vertical are in law firms and service providers, consulting firms. In our privacy sector, most of the jobs are in corporations, and those different hiring authorities function very differently. And typically people think being in corporate, you're gonna have a higher quality of life, generally speaking. But for the first time ever, like the last 2 years, that just hasn't been the case for privacy pros. Um, this last bullet point is, I think, really what we're going to dive deep into in a second here. And that's that AI governance jobs we're finding, now that there are enough of them being advertised that are uniquely separate from privacy positions, are generally paying less than the privacy positions, yet they're requiring the skill sets of the people who are in those privacy positions. So there's a little bit of a challenge right now in the marketplace as AI governance begins to develop its own identity as a vertical, where they're wanting to go get the skill sets from people who are commanding a higher price than what's been budgeted for the new roles as they begin to separate or bifurcate. What are you seeing as it relates to this, Lorenzo? I'm curious on your take.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, when looking at these jobs, it seems like what they're looking for in AI governance is really, it essentially mirrors what certain privacy folks are actually doing, but maybe privacy is just, more encompassing. So this is kind of an interesting kind of development. And, I still think the AI space is probably evolving and these roles are evolving. I assume it's going to change company to company. So, maybe this is just them trying to shake things out and then figure out kind of like, what does this role actually do? What is AI governance per se at my company? And kind of what is the market paying and how do we adapt based on the information that we have? So maybe this is just kind of them figuring things out, or the folks who are
Totally.
actually hiring for these roles. Yeah.
You're 100% right. And a lot of it is trial and error because there isn't really a standardization of what these jobs should pay. And a lot of employers, I think, collect a lot of resumes in order to kind of aggregate that information. But the problem often I find internally is they identify what people are making and then price the job to be equivalent to what people are making. The problem with that kind of formula is you're going to have to pay people more than whatever the market rate is in order to get them to leave their job, particularly the A+ players in the marketplace, right? They're not going to lateral in. So that's where we sort of see the financial market trying to figure itself out. And look, that's why we're doing this webinar. So if we look at the next slide, we're going to dive right into compensation metrics. Here's privacy. Now, look, this isn't a perfect science, but we've sort of broken it down into 3 categories in order to show you there is a difference between what people are getting paid in big tech and the Fortune 500 versus, generally speaking, we kind of can clump together healthcare, biopharma, health tech, and then banking, financial brokerage, telecom, retail, entertainment as sort of another category. Generally speaking, though, these numbers haven't changed in almost a year. They went up a little bit in 23, have stayed pretty flat throughout 24. There has not been a lot of accelerated movement in the market in terms of salaries. And we'll show that difference between the last 2 years and what happened in 21 and 22, which was dramatically different. So this is sort of what we can count on. Here's 2024, is exactly what I'm mentioning. This is the percentage of salary increase based on years of experience at the point of hire. So when you actually go to hire somebody, how much of an increase are they getting from where they were at in base comp to where they are now in base comp? And as you can see here, on the high end, maybe 10% on average. And that's for people with about 4 to 6 years experience. For people breaking into the business, they're usually taking a pay cut. So if you have zero experience doing privacy, you're probably not going to lateral in. You might take less. And as you can see, even executives, there's been very little for them out there to even consider over the last 2 years. But the ones that have moved have not been moving primarily based on financial motivations at the 6% average. Now, we're calling it an 8% average. Here's 2022. Right, it's a very different chart. We saw the average increase at the point of hire in 2022 for people with 4 to 10 years of experience at around 30%. Dramatically different, right? So we all talk about how at a macro level in 23 and 24, we as a society went into a global inflationary period. Well, that global inflationary period is reactive to the inflation that the job market experienced in 21 and 22. And I can tell you 21 didn't look too much different than what we're seeing right here in 2022. 2023 looked radically different. 2023, nobody wanted to hire anybody with more than 5 years experience if they could help it. And it exacerbated salaries for people at 1 to 5 years because that's what everybody wanted. They wanted cheap, less experience. We don't have budget. And those people got extreme salary increases. Right now, nobody's getting extreme salary increases, but it's been that way for a year. We expect not to see things at this hyperbolic rate. I mean, this 2022 is really the peak of the Great Resignation, right? We all remember the Great Depression. Well, the Great Resignation, this is what happened. When everyone starts resigning, everybody starts getting crazy increases in compensation. And then consumer price index followed for the next 2 years from an inflationary perspective. I do think we're going to see salaries go up in 2025 and probably even a little bit more in 2026, but maybe not to this degree, but certainly more than what we're seeing right now. Lorenzo, some comments or thoughts or questions?
What kind of caught my attention, aside from kind of the pay increase in 2022, was what people were looking for at the time as well. So in 2022, it looks like folks are looking for people with 6 to 10 years experience. Those are the folks in highest demand. But in 2024, it's actually probably folks who are just entering the space with 1 to 6 years experience. Could you speak to that a little bit? Like,
Yeah, we
what were
don't have
folks looking?
2023, and I probably should have included 2023 because it almost looks like this chart in 22, but downstream, right? So people with like 1 to 4 years experience were getting 30, 25, 35% increases because people had spent all this money hiring very experienced talent in 21 and 22. And as we said earlier, when Zuckerberg laid off 10,000, everyone thought we were going into a recession, and we went into 2023, everybody downgraded, spend less money, hire less experienced people, and hire less of them. And so what happened is there are a pretty finite amount of people in privacy that have, let's say, 18 months to 3 years of experience. Everyone wanted those people because they were making between 80 and 120 on salary. You could get them for a little bit more. They were significantly less expensive than the people at 4 to 10 years experience who were making 150 to 300 plus. And so that became the hiring strategy to get us through the macro downturn. What happened in 2024 is hiring kind of sprinkled throughout, but nobody was getting big increases because the demand was so thin for full-time professionals. And what was really happening in 2024 is a massive uptick in contract hire, right? That's where most of the hiring occurred in 2024, not full-time, at least not yet. I know we still have 2 months left, but most of the hiring this year has been contract at about a like 60-40 ratio in terms of people actually accepting position, not what's advertised, but what we're seeing in terms of people actually accepting position. So fewer offers made full-time, fewer increases in comp. Logic would tell us next year, people are going to be looking for more experience and a higher pay grade.
Interesting.
Let's talk about AI governance while we still have a few more minutes. We finally did some aggregating of AI governance salaries. And what you're going to see here, and again, these titles are not a perfect science, but we're trying to align it with kind of leveling as you might find in the privacy vertical. What you'll see here is the maxes of these are pretty high, right? They seem reasonable. The mins seem astronomically low. but it's the median that I want everyone to look at, right? What's sort of the middle of the road? And here's what's troubling. Go ahead and hit it, MT. The median leans towards the minimum much more than it leans towards the maximum. So more jobs are priced lower than they are at the high end of the range. And this is creating a number of issues with getting these jobs filled. Not the least of which is they're looking for people from privacy generally to fill these jobs who are getting paid more. And we're going to show that analysis in a second. But I just want everyone to take one last look at this so you can see just how far, a mean of 160. Okay, the bottom is 105 for a manager, but the top is 321. But very few people are paying 321. Most people are paying half that, less than half that, for somebody that has the same job description as one or two companies that might be paying double that. So in terms of understanding the job market, you have to be very careful about just looking at the hyperbolic high end of the market. Lorenzo, any comments before we align this mean with the earlier means we saw from privacy, just to show everybody what's happening?
No comments on my side. This is really interesting. Huge discrepancy.
Let's see the next slide, MT. So here you have the means we just showed you in AI governance and the means that we have in privacy, and pretty much unilaterally across the privacy salaries in the means of them are higher, right? Or the median, I should say, not the mean, the median is higher. It's exacerbated in some instances, like for example, at the executive level, right? Very difficult to go recruit a chief privacy officer of, say, Lorenzo's ilk and convince him to go be an AI governance, leader attorney somewhere else, because the money is just not aligned. And this scales depending on whether you're Fortune 100 or startup community. I think what's interesting here is right in the middle of this market, it sort of aligns. So at that manager level, it might make sense. Those salaries are closer, but the further you get towards the bottom of the market and the further you get towards the top of the market, the more disparity you're sort of seeing in compensation. What does this mean? For me, it means a couple of things. One, not everyone's going to be able to pull privacy people and get them to take governance jobs. Two, people who are really passionate about governance might have to make some sacrifices financially in order to move fully into that vertical while it's still burgeoning. I do think that might turn out to be 2 steps back means 5 steps forward, but we're still too early for me to say that definitively. And it also signals to me that hiring managers are going to have to think about recalibrating how they price these jobs if they really want to go and attract top talent from a financial perspective. Lorenzo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, part of me is kind of wondering what this really means. Are the AI governance roles, again, kind of going back to what we were discussing earlier, they're still shaking out on pay and figuring out what the correct price point is? Or is it the fact that maybe privacy is expected to do AI governance and more, right? That leads to a higher pay. So what are your thoughts on what's actually happening here?
It's a great divergence, both of which I think are true. I do think there's going to be worlds in which people do not separate the disciplines and they do want privacy to own that, and that just becomes part of their job description. But the problem with that is going back to burnout and resources. And this is sort of the guidance that we've been giving people, and we might even have a slide about this in a second, I'm not sure. No, we don't have a slide about this. We'll come back to motivations in a second, MT. If you're a privacy program and most of your governance work is starting at the top and trickling down, it becomes infinitely more difficult to teach new hires, regardless of their leveling, or less expensive entry-level people, the AI governance piece of your business, generally speaking. Those people have to be taken from the middle to the top of your human capital ecosystem in your program and groomed and leveled up. But that's going to leave all this privacy stuff that still has to be done. PIAs, DPIAs, who's handling my ROPA, who's going to handle, all my DPA overflow, who's going to help me with the new laws in this state. And that stuff we've seen most privacy programs handling with contractors. So what we didn't get into today is that contract versus full-time hiring. But that's why there's so much contract hiring in privacy, because they're leveling up a lot of their senior tenured staff to handle AI governance responsibilities. particularly in engineering programs. It may not even be governance, just might be AI responsibilities to some extent, using privacy engineers for a variety of reasons. But it leaves a void of task-based things that can be solved with contract resources. AI governance tasks can't necessarily be solved with contract resources. There isn't a pool of resources available that has those experiences to plug and play in without a lot of training and understanding your culture and understanding your processes and your technologies and your tool stack. I mean, I could go on and on and on. It could take months for somebody to really be impactful to the business as a contractor in AI governance. But in privacy, there are people that can come in and pick up all your DPIAs. There are people that can come in that can handle your DPA over. There are people that can come in and help you fix your DSAR program, right? That talent is available. So the guidance we give people is they are strapped for budget, have to handle both a privacy program and an AI governance program without an increase in headcount. How do you do it? How do you start delegating certain responsibilities in order to backfill and staff in a responsible and realistic way? And that's what we've seen happen. That's why there's so much trending, I think, this year towards contract staffing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the leveling up is a good point. If you're a lean team, I would be thinking about leveling up certain folks within the privacy team to actually have them take on more, and then find creative ways to kind of address the PIAs and all of the other things that you still need to do, day to day. Is it your team who's going to do this, or could you, for example, if DPA negotiations are a big thing, can you have another team kind of take that on rather than your team internally? Can you create playbooks? So yeah, I think folks just need to get creative as to how they're going to handle all of these emerging issues with hiring, staying relatively flat, or not really being there.
We've got a few more minutes, so I want to make sure we leave time for a few questions. I think that's everything in our deck for today. Correct, MT? Oh, motivations. Look, we talked about this. Everyone wanted to work remotely for 2 years. And then if we go to 2024, you can see that burnout is the #1 motivator. People are definitely eager for more money. As you can see, they haven't been getting big increases over the last few years. And this idea of getting in or out of AI governance is sort of motivating people in both directions, as are a lot of people wanting to break in or transition in. We got a Q&A box for anybody that has questions. Here's speed of hire. We can briefly take a look at this. As you can see here, things slowed down in the summer, but things are picking back up now. We anticipate that we'll start to see things sort of looking like what Q4 of 2022 looked like in pretty short order. Nothing too dramatic to see here. If you want to connect with us on LinkedIn, this is where to do it. You can find me and Lorenzo. We're always available. I know Lorenzo does dedicate some time for mentorship and community development of professionals, as do I. And of course, if you're looking for work or looking to hire, contact us here at TRU. We've got 2 minutes. If anyone's got any questions, you can pop them in the Q&A. Hopefully everybody found this really valuable. And it's been an honor to do this with you, Lorenzo. I know we've always chatted and seen each other at these different events, but it was great to get into some deep banter with you for half an hour on what's happening in the job market.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. We'll do it again. Everybody, thank you for coming, and we'll see you next month on Eye on Privacy. Thank you so much.